few seconds. It's really to get ready for the COVID vaccines logistics by air. Lots of things are being written already on the topic, lots of questions unknown, and we'd like to give you a good overview on what has been done so far and what has been achieved. This project Sunrays is a joint initiative between those two organizations. And it's supported by a steering group that is composed by board members of both TIACA and Pharma.Aero. And I would like to really thank all the task force members, all the project contributors, Shanghai Airport, Turkish Cargo, Flexport, Miami Airport, Neutral Air Partner, SATS, Edmonton Airport, and Brussels Airport. Without them, we couldn't do that project. I'd like to introduce you to the speakers today, if my slides allow me to do so. Here we are. So I'm happy to welcome and thank already in advance Emir Pineda from Miami Airport. Emir is a board member of TIACA, and he's also the Sunrays project lead on TIACA side. Nathan de Valck from Brussels Airport. Nathan is the chair of Pharma.Aero, and he's part of the Sunrays project. And the presentation today, we will try to keep it like 15 minutes long. And then we have a Q&A session. And the Q&A will be open, and you can ask your questions to Emir and Nathan, but you can also ask questions to Neil Jones-Shah from Flexport, Christos Spirou from Neutral Air Partner, Ximeng Wang from SATS, Stephen Poldmans from Brussels Airport, Frank van Gelder from Pharma.Aero, and myself from TIACA. I would like to now ask Nathan to take over and present you Sunrays project.
Thank you, Celine. Before diving into the details of the project findings, I will give a short introduction on the context of the project. As we all know, pharmaceutical manufacturers are racing to develop future COVID-19 vaccines. And as the world is waiting, we see unprecedented levels of expectations, urgency, and uncertainties. Vaccines are complex to package, store, handle, and transport. And as the vaccines are not yet approved and known, the logistics industry is blind. There's a wide range of uncertainties relating to volumes, production timelines, trade lanes, requirements for transport and storage. And all of this is affecting the decision-making process and the levels of preparedness. As a result, the decision-making process in the logistics sector looks like a risky gamble. How to decide on what, when, and where to invest with no solid market information and in a challenging economic environment. Some examples are investments in cold chain infrastructure, training, security equipment, innovative packaging and active containers, data sharing platforms, and monitoring solutions. Celine, you can move to the next slide, please. This is why Pharma.Aero and TIACA started Project Sunrays. We want to collect insights and provide value for our air cargo industry. This includes one-to-one interviews and regular engagement with the vaccine manufacturers and pharmaceutical logistics professionals. Additionally, we have conducted an industry survey to collect insights from the air freight sector on capabilities, readiness, and concerns in order to get more information on all type of concerns that live and are active in the industry. By analyzing and investigating this feedback, we aim to provide expertise, guidelines, and recommendations throughout the project, as well as mobilizing our industry and collaborate for the greater reach and impact. If you look at the first slide with the results and some of the findings of our project, if you can move one slide back, please, Celine. we can see what shippers want and expect from the logistics service providers. At the bottom of the slide, you see a list of all the participating shippers, and you can clearly see that we have a broad group of pharmaceutical manufacturers that engaged with us and that committed to provide their input. And it is clear, it has become clear from the start that the expectations the shippers have are higher than the normal general cargo or current standard pharma services we offer in our industry. The first one relates to speed. They expect an express service, so a quick transit of vaccine shipments at every step of the supply chain. Secondly, the security and customs procedures need to be aligned in order to avoid any type of delay at any step in the supply chain, and specifically at airports. The second topic of concern is related to security. Security programs need to be in place to prevent counterfeit and theft. The third topic is related to reliability. First of all, the shippers expect a guaranteed delivery time. Secondly, they expect recorded information on shipment status, for example, temperature or conditions at each milestone. And they need this recorded information in order to verify the products during the handling in the supply chain. And then last but not least, the last topic is transparency. And here we can find most of the new expectations. First of all, the shippers expect information on existing air freight capacity and the lead times for each specific trade lane they will use. Secondly, they expect reliable information on capabilities of all the logistic service providers that are involved in the handling of their shipments, not only at origin, but also including each cargo facility at transit and destination point. A third topic related to transparency is that they expect real-time or at least near real-time information, tracking, monitoring, and information sharing on shipments. This means information on location, status, and temperature. And they need this real-time information in order to be able to alert their service providers in case of deviation and allowing them still the time to correct anything that would have gone wrong. Next slide, please. So this is what was specific for the shippers. We have also collected some feedback from the logistics service providers and what specifically they need from pharmaceutical shippers. And if we talk about logistics service providers, we talk about freight forwarders, packaging solution providers, airports, ground handlers, and airlines. And the type of information they request is related to trade lanes and volumes, product specifications, specific handling and storage and security conditions, packaging details, real-time shipment and monitoring requirements, the use of dry ice or not, what type of expectations do shippers have there, and what type of handling do their products need, the use of active containers needing power supplies, and a list of monitoring devices they will be using inside their packaging. So a whole list of needs, of specific requirements our operators have. And I now give the word to Emir, who will dive in the details of the survey.
Thank you, Nathan, very much. Appreciate it, and welcome everyone to the session this morning. So how ready is the air cargo industry? A survey to collect insights from the air freight industry on the capabilities, readiness, concerns, and needs, plus a deep dive discussion with air pharma logistics specialists, was conducted. The survey ran from September 8th to the 20th, where we received 181 answers. As you can see, it was pretty evenly distributed across the supply chain, with forwarders accounting for 30%, airlines 26%, ground handlers 12%, airports 14%, and finally solution providers 18%. The overall objective was to have a better understanding on the current readiness level in the air freight supply chain for the future COVID-19 vaccines. Plans to get ready and existing capabilities to handle, store, transport, and deliver vaccines were all analyzed. Next slide, please. The survey indicated that only 28% of the industry felt prepared, while on the opposite end, 19% felt very unprepared. On the scale on the right, from 1 to 10, with 10 feeling the most prepared and 1 being the least prepared, the question was, how well informed and prepared is your organization in the global air transportation of COVID-19 vaccines? The average was 6.32, indicating that slightly more than half felt some level of preparedness. Next slide, please. When it comes to airports and their ground handling companies, the level of preparedness is less than those of airlines and freight forwarders, with the ground handlers coming at 5.55 and airports at 5.88. The airlines came in slightly above average at 6.36, while forwarders were slightly below at 6.26 on the scale. At the top of the scale were the solution providers, mainly ULD and packaging providing, ranking at 7.22 on the scale. When you think about it, this actually makes sense, since they are closer to the pharma shipper and in regular contact with them, while others are further downstream in the supply chain with limited or no direct contact with the shipper. What we don't want to happen here is a repeat of IATA's e-freight project, which only engaged the airlines initially and not the airports and ground handlers, causing them to lose a lot of time in the process by not having their input from the beginning. When we need to learn from past mistakes and make sure pharma shippers and manufacturers, along with their agents and airlines, don't leave the ground handlers and the airports behind. Next slide, please. When we asked if organizations were already engaging vaccine manufacturers, those that were felt much more prepared for the coming logistic challenges of the COVID-19 vaccines. Those stakeholders already in close engagement with manufacturers were at 7.67 on the scale, while those that were not yet in contact with the vaccine manufacturers fell below average at 5.09. Of those companies who are engaged, 87% felt they have the right structure in place with dedicated teams. 61% already in close engagement with their supply chain partners, and 31% either started or will start engaging them soon. The underlying message here is clear. Pharma shippers need to make sure they involve all providers. Thank you. Next slide. Here we asked a slightly different question. It had to do with those organizations involved in clinical trial logistics. How many felt more prepared for the coming COVID-19 challenge? Those involved in the logistics of clinical trials came in at 7.27 on the scale, while those organizations not involved in air transport of vaccines in clinical trials came in at 5.92. Obviously, there's urgency here to be prepared. The sooner the better. Of those surveyed, 20% of the respondents already involved in logistics of COVID-19 vaccines in clinical trials. They provided the following feedback on best practices and recommendations. First, setting up a specialized team to manage COVID-19 vaccine orders. This was applicable to all the stakeholders. Secondly, integrating methods and solutions to track, collect, and share data on the shipments. This was more geared towards providers such as ULD, packaging companies, and IT platform providers. Developing new and better packaging and dry ice solutions, again for ULD and packaging providers. Defining final mile delivery solution. This was mainly for the forwarders. And finally, expanding network capabilities with CIV Pharma certified partners and adequate cargo facilities. This is more applicable to airlines, forwarders, handlers, and of course, airports. Next slide, please. When we ask the industry, what are your main risks, real or perceived, linked to the transport of the COVID-19 vaccine in huge quantity, limited time frame, and during the current economic downturn? They listed these 8 major concerns. Temperature excursions, probably the most important factor to avoid. Lack of visibility, lack of transparency on shipment transport conditions, lack of adequate infrastructure, no ground chain no cold chain ground equipment, cool dollies or containers. Capacity storage, availability of cargo space, something that's on everyone's mind. Unexpected delays, mostly dealing with border clearance. End-to-end connectivity, staying informed, having data loggers. Security, avoid counterfeit vaccines, as Nathan mentioned earlier. And finally, cost, managing your resources. All of these concerns have a strong foundation. As an industry, we need to mitigate as many as possible. But we cannot stop planning. We need to anticipate as best we can, even when information is lacking. Next slide, please. All of us in this industry know anticipating and managing risks are part of the DNA of the air cargo industry. We do this every day, no matter where you work, whether you're a forwarder, airline, ground handler, trucking company, or even an airport. In response to the concerns from the previous slide, the air freight industry has come up with the following mitigating strategies. They include training more staff, setting up 24/7 control tower to handle irregularities, adding cargo capacity, facilitating approval of additional charter flights and planning special slots, educating customers on load optimization and container utilization to maximize space on aircraft, mapping current capabilities at origin, transit, and destination points, expanding cargo facilities to include new cold storage infrastructure, securing availability of containers, dry ice, and space, and finally using or encouraging the use of monitoring devices. Next slide, please. When we asked whether your organization is planning to introduce additional and or premium service for shippers or clients, the respondents said 49% will and 42% may introduce additional or premium services. Some of those included dedicated teams, special care services, 24/7 availability, airside thermal protection, guaranteed insurance on vaccine transported, express booking, fast breakdown, clearance at any time, and finally tailor-made products with special handling and monitoring of temperature control, along with timely information to the shipper. Next slide, please. Now, when it came to organizations planning to invest in additional infrastructure, here the responses were a bit lower. 36% said they will, and 41% may invest in additional physical or digital infrastructure. This type of infrastructure mostly dealt with additional staff, training, cool rooms, storage facilities, containers, mobile temperature readers, data loggers, electrical sockets, aircraft charters, and also software and data platforms such as cargo community systems. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to my colleague Nathan to continue with today's presentation.
We see that the different logistics operators and the air freight logistics industry in general is well equipped to handle temperature controlled shipments. When we ask the question what type of infrastructure they have in place, we see very clearly on the right-hand side of the slide in the graph that the most typical temperature ranges that exist in our industry when transporting pharmaceuticals is present in most locations. And so this includes the 15 to 25 degrees Celsius, 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, and then the standard minus 20 degrees deep freezing. When it comes to the lower temperatures, it's clear that this is not a standard type of storage facility, and there we see a much lower percentage of infrastructure that is present. And it is clear that for vaccines requiring deep frozen temperatures, the success will require not only the right type of infrastructure, but also the right packaging, the right standard operating procedures and trained staff that needs to be present on site, and if necessary, dry ice stocks to refill containers whenever needed. Next slide, please. We also see, if we ask the question whether enough specific ground handling equipment and ULDs are available, that 54% of the air freight providers give a positive response. So a high percentage of them is today already ready to handle these type of shipments using specialized equipment. And this includes specific packaging, boxes with phase change material, active containers and the necessary charging point to recharge the batteries of these active containers, dry ice containers and having the dry ice available, or agreements in place to re-ice whenever necessary. Airports that have cool dollies available to do the transport on airside, temperature data loggers throughout the different steps in the supply chain, freezer rooms, and specific ground handling equipment, such as pre-cooling of reefer vehicles, refrigerated delivery vans, or trackers to check real-time temperature being maintained in the vehicle. Next slide, please. We can conclude that we are still very in early stages of industry preparation for the transport of the vaccines, and that there are still a lot of unknowns. But the life-saving logistics to deliver the vaccines will need a combination of people, infrastructure, packaging solutions, and collaboration. And getting the equation right requires us to work together. So collaboration is key in this whole exercise. Emir, I hand the word back to you.
Thank you, Nathan. In conclusion, we have seen that we face unprecedented times with the biggest logistical challenge the modern world has ever seen. We have identified what the shippers want: speed, security, reliability, and transparency. And what freight industry expects from those shippers: product specifications, size, and packaging, volumes, geographical information, and a list of monitoring devices. We have seen the results of the survey. Only 28% of the industry feels well prepared to manage vaccine logistics. We know the top 8 concerns of the industry: temperature, lack of visibility, lack of infrastructure, capacity shortages, delays, end-to-end connectivity, security, and cost. We also know that anticipating and managing risk are part of the DNA of every air cargo professional. We also learned that there are some appetite for investment in service and infrastructure. The industry is also well equipped to handle temperature control shipments, and that it has solutions available for deep frozen shipments. At present, 54% of the industry has cold chain ground equipment already in place. And finally, through the combination of people, infrastructure, standards, packaging, and collaboration, the air cargo industry feels it can deliver. So the time has come for a call to action. In the area of industry collaboration, vaccine manufacturers should involve all their cargo logistics providers as early as possible. All cargo stakeholders shall be involved in the conversation, including airports and ground handlers. We don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. When it comes to visibility and transparency, the use of tracking and monitoring devices should be encouraged, and the approval process for their safe use in flight needs to start immediately. The rollout of digital solutions and data sharing platforms should be accelerated. We also need to scale up the capabilities of the industry. Each air cargo stakeholder should map its existing capabilities at each location and make this information available. Dry ice, active containers, trained staff, and cold chain space availability should be secured early. Infrastructure investment decisions should be made as early as possible. Air freight needs the support from the regulators. Governments, customs authorities, and border agencies should be ready to facilitate and expedite all COVID-19 vaccine-related merchandise. Finally, we also need the support of NGOs. International organizations, NGOs, and donors should support cold chain capacity building efforts in least developed countries to ensure no one is left behind in the upcoming global immunization campaign. Next slide. So we go from a call of action to what next for Project Sunrays. This effort will go on in the coming weeks and months. It doesn't end here. We plan on continuing our open dialogue with the manufacturers. We've been very successful in that effort, and monitoring vaccine development. Delivery of a set of guidelines to ensure the proper and safe handling, storage, and transport of the vaccines. Follow up on our advocacy efforts and call to action for pharma shippers, air freight industry, and policymakers around the world. And finally, we continue our educational efforts via white papers, webinars, and presentations like today's. At this time, I want to thank all of you for your participation, and I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Frank, to begin our Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both Nathan and Emir, for this overview on the Project Sunrays and what we have been working on in the past couple of weeks. I can already tell you that some questions are being raised while we speak, but I would like to open the floor also to all the rest of our panel members who are part during this media briefing. So we have Neil Jones Shah from Flexport, we have Turan Özün from Turkish Cargo, we have Christos Spiro from Neutral Air Partners with us, we have Ximing Wong from SATS, we have Sanjeev Gaitia from Astral Aviation, and we have Trevor Caswell from Edwin Airport, together with Nathan, Emir, Stephen Polmas, Chairman of TIACA, and Celine. So let me start with the questions. We have about 5 questions pending right now, or 4 questions, sorry. So let me start with the first question from Michael Mackey to all the panelists. The question is, do you notice any regional differences in responses and planning? So I think this is a question that could go to both speakers of today. It's like how airports and regions are preparing themselves, and do you see any difference between them? Please feel free to take the question.
I'll kick things off, Frank, if you don't mind. There's definitely regional differences out there. I'll give the example of the United States, where the federal government here has contracted with McKesson, who is a contractor for the government, to start partitioning out smaller subcontractors to the integrated carriers for the distribution of the vaccine in the United States. Other parts of the world are doing similar things. Some of them will involve the military, some may involve other government agencies, some will have to rely on NGOs. So the responses will be differently per region of the world. What we do need to do is, as Nathan was mentioning in one of his final slides, is collaborate and make sure that no one gets left behind. I mean, we're talking about people's lives. We want to make sure that we're able to distribute the vaccine as equitably as possible from around the world. But because of the geographic locations of the world where the manufacturing will take place, because of the economic conditions, because of availability of capacity around the world, there is going to be some regional differences. Our airport here in Miami, for example, is in preparedness mode right now, along with other airports around the world, to try to make sure that our community is as prepared as possible for the distribution of the vaccine when it starts coming in early next year and middle of next year or so. So the reactions vary, and I'd like to maybe hear from the rest of the panel on their views. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just to add in from my side, Emir, I completely agree with you just said. I think 2 additional elements. First of all, what we typically saw in the past, it also happens now. A couple of airports are well advanced and specialized in pharma handling, and they are also the ones that are most active currently to prepare their communities. We have seen some announcements in the media over the past weeks, where several airports have launched local task forces. I think this is a good evolution, but we need an even wider support and preparation in the industry. But I guess that's just a matter of timing. Secondly, related to pharmaceutical shippers, we also see that depending on how far they are in the development of their vaccine and in the testing of the vaccine, that we see more specific information. For a lot of shippers, it's still very unclear how they will ship their products, in which conditions, and also where the production will take place. So this has a huge impact on trade lanes, but unfortunately for most of the shippers, this type of information is not available yet. So there we do see a difference in response and in the level of detail of specifications we get.
Okay, thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Emir. I hope this fulfills the question of Michael. Let's move to the next question from Marcelo Richard. It's also addressed to all panelists, but there are some specific areas we request. The first question is, are the states, so we look at the United States governments, being considered as key players in this logistics? And do they need to guarantee fast custom clearance? So I think that might be an interesting question also for freight forwarders. So I'd like to address this question first to Neil Jones-Shah, who is with us in the panel, to have his views on this.
Well, yeah, thank you, and pleasure to be with everyone this morning, this afternoon. So in terms of collaboration with governments, it's obviously absolutely critical. I think that in many parts of the world, many countries, the governments are actually taking a lead in vaccine development, vaccine distribution. Emir just talked about, alluded to Operation Warp Speed here in the U.S., where the government is coordinating with companies like McKesson and the integrators, FedEx and UPS, for a lot of the distribution of the vaccine. So, you can't understate how important it is for governments to be on board. We know what happens when government and industry aren't on the same page, where things get backed up at borders, clearances aren't achieved quickly, and then what happens is the world we fail the world, right, when we do that. And so collaboration with governments is critical. I think that it's happening. It's probably not happening on a global scale at the level that we need in order to be successful here. But hopefully it's events like this that will open people's eyes and the regulators' eyes to the importance of their seat at the table.
Thank you very much, Neil, for sharing this. There is also a question from Martin Berman-Gorvine, which went a bit in the same direction. The question there is, how prepared is the industry to coordinate with federal, state, and local authorities on vaccine distribution? So it also goes there. Is there discussion with federal, state, and clearance procedures when it comes down to these vaccines? The next question that also came from Marcelo Richard goes more, into my opinion, to the airlines. So we have today with us Turhan Özen from Turkish Cargo Airlines. We have Sanjeev Gadhia from Astral Aviation with us. So I would like to ask both of you your opinion on the next question. A few weeks ago, IATA said 8,000 freighter flights would be needed. Do you agree with this? And which is the base of this calculation? Are the origins and destinations making these calculations already known? So I would like to open the question to both Turhan and Sanjeev.
Both of them actually cannot answer because they couldn't make it today. So they will be available for interviews later on, but to answer the question, we need to direct it to somebody else.
Well, okay. Maybe Frank, I'll jump in. This is Neil. As a former airline guy for most of my career, maybe I'll take a crack at this. And I think that when you look at, a lot of people have come up with calculations in terms of the number of aircraft, the number of flights it's going to take in order to distribute the vaccine. I think the real honest answer is we don't know, right? Because we don't know exactly how it's going to be packaged. We don't know exactly how much dry ice, what is the top end limitation and the exceptions that we can make when it comes to the amount of dry ice on an aircraft, right? How much dry ice is eventually going to be needed in order to keep this vaccine at -20, -80, -150. So Yeah, just like Emir and Nathan presented in the early part of this presentation, right? The more information we have, the more prepared the industry feels. And this industry has risen to almost every challenge it's been faced with over the past 50 years. But clarity is really important here. And so I don't know if the number is 8,000. I suspect it's something less than that. Particularly given, regionally where these manufacturers are going to be distributed, are going to be manufactured, and that, in many parts of the world, over-the-road distribution will be more effective than maybe air cargo distribution. But again, once we have a little bit more information on exactly the packaging, dry ice requirements, and temperature requirements for the shipment of finished product, then I think we'll be able to get a much more detailed calculation.
Indeed.
I'll just add on to the answer is that how IATA came up with this 8,000 is because they do not have the new information on the COVID vaccine. What is the packaging size? No one can tell us now. So they based on the current practice, the current vaccine that has been circulated and shipped around the world. Based on the current practice is that 777 freighter can carry about 1 to 1.2 million vaccines. This is the current practice. And the estimate for 2021 is that about 9 billion of vaccines will be carried during the year. So if you use 9 billion and divide by 1 to 1.2 million vaccines per freighter aircraft, then you roughly will get about around that 8,000, which IATA predicted. So in absence of the actual packaging information by the COVID-19 manufacturers and packaging agents, IATA basically just use the existing information and make a prediction. That's how we see they calculated it.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to add one other thing, Frank and Deputy Chimming. The calculations are all based, I think, mostly on single doses. Many of the vaccines that are at least going to be coming out initially will require 2 doses. So again, it goes back to what Neil was saying. We don't really know how much is going to be required and how much the manufacturers are or where it's going to be manufactured from. But if you were calculating whatever number it is and require 2 doses, then you were just going to have to double everything.
Okay, thank you very much, Emir. Questions are piling up, which is very good. So people need to know a bit more on what we are doing. The next question is from Bridget Gladhill to all panelists. Is reluctance being encountered regarding investment for a perhaps one-off time-limited vaccine transport project? So I think it considers both ground handlers a lot in what to invest, airports in what to invest. So I would like to address the question to first Chimming, to you, and then moreover to Nathan and Emir to address this question, and perhaps Trevor if he's with us. So Chimming, please.
Well, it all depends. You see, if the prediction is correct and 9 billion of vaccines to be carried for the entire year is spread out evenly every month, then there is no peak demand. And if there's no peak demand, then the urgency or need to invest more for permanent infrastructure will be less, right? But if the demand is generated consistently over the next couple of years, then there will be the service provider will be more prepared to invest. Now, then of course, if this is just once off, then the service provider can have temporary measures to increase the capacity, like hiring refrigerated containers to temporarily increase the capacity. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps I would hand over also this question to both Emir and Nathan to give a vision from an airport view on it.
From Miami's perspective, we have limited opportunities for infrastructure improvement, in the sense that mostly it would be up to our tenants that would be driving that effort. Airport infrastructure here at Miami is to develop large scale warehousing, roads, and the support on the airfield for those infrastructure projects. But coolers, reefers, or some of the temporary things that Shamim was alluding to, those is really going to be driven by our tenants, by the cargo handling companies, by the airlines that make up our cargo community, as well as possibly some of the forwarders that are off airport. So from an airport perspective, the infrastructure effort, I think, would be somewhat limited, again, due to the fact that we have more long-term challenges in mind when we build infrastructure, being warehouses, roadways, ramps, airfield development, runways, and those kinds of things is where we'll focus more on, versus temporary. And when I say temporary, this could last a few years, but that's very short for the cycle of an airport development program.
Hey, Frank, this is Neil. Just to add just a couple of more comments to this is that, honestly, I think that the traditional ROI calculation is being thrown out the window here, right? I mean, companies aren't going through this sort of mental math in order to figure out if this investment is going to have a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year payoff. Right now, a lot of companies are answering the call to, save humanity, for lack of a better word, and to solve this problem. And in many parts of the world, the governments are stepping up and giving fairly large grants, right, to help fund some of the investment that's going to be needed in order to get this off the ground. And you're seeing many parts of the supply chain making these investments, right? I mean, just a couple of examples here in the U.S., UPS and FedEx are both spending millions building freezer farms at their hubs, right, to handle these super cold temperatures. I'm sure McKesson is making investments as needed, with their distribution network in order to handle the volume of vaccine that's coming in. I don't think that there's been a lot of sort of, CFO involvement in the investment number, because I think at the end of the day, the governments are going to end up footing the bill for getting this distribution network in place, either through grants or zero interest loans or whatever it might be, in order to make sure that the vaccine gets properly distributed.
Okay, thank you, Neil, for that add-on. Nathan, perhaps you can add on?
To add on from my side, looking at the perspective of the airport and especially of the total community, I think there's a lot that can be optimized just by looking at the total supply chain, looking at which facilities, which cool infrastructure is available in the various steps of the supply chains. You can, we've heard other speakers talk about temporarily increasing capacity. But I also think by just playing it smartly in collaboration with the shipper, using the right type of packaging, you can optimize the existing infrastructure and perhaps even build up a bigger stock in certain places in the supply chain where you have more capability. So it's really about creating that transparency in capabilities in the various steps in the supply chain and optimizing it as a total community. A big possibility lies there.
Thank you for all the add-on information on this small question, but with a lot of concerns and a lot of answer to it. Eric Kullish has a couple of questions to our panel, and the first one is: there has been a great deal of cold chain investment by the air freight sector in recent years, but I'm still unclear if there is enough adequate infrastructure for the vaccines. goes a bit to the previous question. Is there enough infrastructure overall, or are there geographic shortages? Or does the shortage pertain to the deep frozen vaccines? It comes back to the previous question a bit, but also I think what we have seen in the past couple of weeks is that there is a difference between manufacturing sites and the real supply chain once it's entering the supply chain. So I would like to give the word again, probably to the ground handling, to you, Ximeng, but also to again airports to answer this question.
Okay, so overall geographical shortage will be because if you look at the survey results, 10% of the respondents says that they cannot handle temperature sensitive shipments and vaccines. So these are usually smaller airports with very little cold chain facilities to handle. So there are geographical shortages, right? The more advanced airports will have the necessary infrastructure to handle. Just now, you all heard that UPS is building some 6,000 freezer farms, right? So bigger airports, bigger locations do have the infrastructure, but smaller airports, certain continents where they don't have this kind of infrastructure, there will be shortages, right? Now then, pertaining to deep frozen vaccines, again, if you look at the survey results, only 15% of the respondents can handle minus 80 degree kind of temperature storage, right? So, but if it's minus 20, then we have about 60% can handle. So depending on how what kind of temperature is set by the manufacturer, different areas can handle at different capacities and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. If you could add on that, Nathan, perhaps, because that's something that keeps on coming back. And I know that recently Brussels Airport has also installed a task force. So what would your add-on be on this question?
Well, it's clear that it's an area for concern. We need to have some clarity on capabilities throughout the supply chain, because it's possible that in certain areas globally or even locally you can have weak links. So I think in the next weeks, months, it's vital for our industry to inventorize this together with not just only forwarders, but to collaborating on this together with airports and airlines, so that we can give a clear answer to shippers what we can and especially what we cannot do as an industry in order to guarantee a smooth handling of these shipments and not have them blocked somewhere in a place where the right infrastructure is not present.
Okay, thank you very much, Nathan. A lot of concern I see in the question, indirectly or directly, is indeed about the deep frozen and the very low temperature that some of the manufacturers currently are giving us the information. I would like to turn now to Ray John, who pumped out two questions to us. The first one is the dominant takeaway of any discussion on COVID vaccine logistics anywhere today is collaboration. And according to your survey, the stakeholder who is closest to the manufacturer and the one who has the most relevant information on any potential COVID vaccine is solution providers. How easily do you have intelligence flowing in from solution providers? I would like to address this question to Christos Spirou from Neutral Air Partners. Christos, please.
Yes. Hello, thank you for the question. Well, I wouldn't say that it's easy to have intelligence from solution providers. What we see presently, we see that those specialized critical logistics specialists, that they do biopharma and clinical trials, those are the ones that the pharma shippers and the manufacturers, they trust them pretty much by giving them information. The reason is they have experience moving pharma, moving temperature controlled cargoes. They know the dry ice handling process and the final mile solutions. However, they don't have the experience of shipping bulk cargo by air freight. So even though they get some information, they still think with their express courier kind of mind. So they're not ready to handle it. And lately, we see the information are a bit conflicting as far as the requirements of the vaccines. You see a lot of different pharma shippers have different requirements, the packaging. So even though they get information, because the pharma shippers, they trust them based on the clinical trial logistics of the vaccines, still there is a big uncertainty as far as the right requirements. So it's not easy, basically.
Frank, I'd like to add one comment here from Neil. Agree with everything Christos said, is that, traditionally these have been shipped in much smaller quantities, right? The infrastructure does exist to do that. We're talking about an entirely different scale here. And so, our continued sort of messaging to the pharmaceutical shippers is that, as open and forthcoming as you can be about your requirements, the faster the industry can react and get prepared, right? I mean, whether you need a lot of physical investment or you just need an investment in creative solutions, that all takes time. It takes time to not only develop the solution, but it takes time to figure out how you're going to implement it. And, time is something that we will run out of very quickly, once this vaccine gets its authorization, which is why we're trying to really pressurize this topic, is that, the more information we get, the greater the level of collaboration, and then, solutions will be forthcoming. But right there, even from the survey, you saw that, people who are closest to the pharmaceutical shippers feel the most comfortable because they have that open line of communication. And those that are 2 and 3 steps removed are actually very nervous about the role they need to play in order to make this whole thing successful. So I think it's very clear what needs to happen here.
Indeed, and I think that underlines also the questionnaires we have seen with the answers that we have seen coming in the questionnaires as such. What we see from out of Pharma.Aero, honestly, we have quite some solution providers on board with our organization, and indeed they look on a very in a very pragmatic way often to it, but also look into how they can analyze the specific requests of different pharma shippers in this case. Okay, we have a couple of more questions coming. Another one from Eric Kullish is, will general cargo get bumped, delayed for vaccine shipments, given the capacity situation currently? I think that's a question for the airline, but perhaps Neil, as you are a previous airline, as you said yourself, you can take this question again.
Sure, and I should have anticipated this question from Eric. I know Eric pretty well, so I had no doubt he would ask it. Look, I mean, the reality of the situation is that, COVID-19 is going to be the biggest product launch in the history of mankind, right? And so, but we all know when Apple launches a new product, what it does to kind of capacity for everybody else. It's a big sucking sound, and all of that capacity, goes towards moving that single product. There is going to be an impact, right, in terms of the amount of available capacity, because the global passenger fleets for the most part are suspended. We've lost a huge percentage of the belly freight. Over 80% of belly cargo capacity has been sidelined. So we are in an undercapacity situation globally. Now, to what extent this impacts just regular commercial cargo, we don't really know yet, because we don't know exactly the regional production and distribution sort of strategy for all the pharmaceutical shippers. And at the end of the day, how much of this vaccine is going to have to travel by air versus how much can go on an over-the-road network or things like that. So once we get a little bit more clarity on that and the exact volumes and how much we can carry and what type of aircraft are best suited to do that, I think we'll have a much clearer picture on the overall global commercial impact. of this project. But this isn't a 4-week effort, right? This is going to be a 2021 into 2022 effort. So it will be spread out over a number of months and not just impact, the Christmas logistics season.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. I don't know, Christos, if you want to add something on what Neil just said from your side.
Yes, I definitely agree with Neil, and I will have to say, well, my answer will be kind of easy. I would say yes, general cargo will get bumped and delayed over vaccine shipments. And actually, if you see in a normal environment, even today or before the COVID-19, pharma gets priority over general cargo anyway, regular pharma. So imagine, obviously, what will happen with the vaccine shipment. So the question is, my opinion from the small, medium-sized freight forwarding community, yes, it will get bumped.
Just to add on, Frank, from my side, I think what we can draw a parallel here with the PPE shipments. We have seen that this huge surge in capacity demand increased the transport costs, and as a result, certain types of transport became economically viable again. So we have seen a lot of passenger freighters or freighters with passenger aircraft being put into service. We can expect a similar reaction if there's really big demands on certain lanes and a shortage in capacity. Well, who knows? We will see again a big number of passenger airlines being deployed as freighters in order to add capacity to the market. So that could help to avoid bumping cargo off other planes.
Okay.
Another thing is, I would like to add, is that the general cargo shippers might not be able to afford to pay the $10, $12, $15 a kilo to make their cargo priority over the vaccines. So that will be a challenge, actually, when we saw that during the PPE goods period.
Okay, thank you very much. There is still some concern, and this goes to one of the last questions, as we are at 3 o'clock already. There's a lot of interest from the different press contracts we have in the call. It's from Ray John again, and it's about especially on what happens if manufacturing and distribution are largely restricted within countries and regions giving very limited or little volume for air freight. So there is a concern about the different global regions and if it's equally being able to access, or if there are regions where you have limited capacity. I would turn these questions back to both main speakers, I think, to have a look and an idea on this one.
Yeah, Frank, that's a good question, and obviously, I think there's definitely indications, at least from the media, that could be the case. A lot of governments have announced that they have bought large quantities of doses of the vaccine, even prior to the vaccines being approved. So the availability in some regions, in particular in some countries, will go first to the inhabitants or the population of that individual country, followed by distribution outside of the country. We've already are seeing some of that taking place in China and in Russia and other places around the world that have developed early vaccines that didn't follow the standard protocol as some of the other ones that we're more familiar with. So nationalistic efforts, I think, are going to play into this to some extent. And then after those efforts are well on their way, we'll see that expand to international efforts.
Thank you, Emir. If you would like to add on to that, Nathan?
Well, I totally agree with Emir. I think on top of that, the COVID vaccine production and transports will it's not going to be a short time effort. Like Neil already mentioned, I think there will be a lot of production taking place next year and even in the next 2 years. So it's possible that there will be a nationalistic reflex in the initial phase, but then once the production volumes are up, there should be enough vaccines available to be distributed to everybody in the world. But yeah, it can have an impact on the initial trade lanes and trade flows, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a lot of interest and questions keep on coming. We are through our time. Time flew. We had a lot of interest from the floor. I think that all our panelists that are here in the call today are more than happy to further elaborate on your questions in the next couple of hours and days. The press releases will go out from both organizations, and you will be able to find the necessary contact details on the press release out there. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us with further questions that we can definitely address with the entire group of experts. I would really like to thank the two major speakers today, both Emir Pineda and Nathan de Valck. I also would like to thank our single point of contacts in our task force, both JC Yip from Changi Airport and Emir Pineda from Miami Airport, together with the people today at the table, Neil, Turhan, Christos, Chimeng, Sanjeev, Trevor, and of course the chairman, co-chairman of Pharma.Aero, Nathan de Valck, and chairman of TIACA, Steven Polmans. And I would like to thank my colleague, Céline Hourcade, who made a lot of efforts getting all the slides together with the panelists, together with the experts. So I hope we could have informed you correctly on the most important questions you have for the moment. But again, don't hesitate or don't feel, just feel open and reach out to us in the case you have more questions. Thank you very much, and we wish you all a beautiful further continuation of your day when it's morning for you, or a quiet evening when it's late evening. Thank you very much, and hope to talk to you soon.